Good evening and welcome to this lecture. I will talk about the I, the fixed point in the middle of the universe. And maybe we could say that the I is the innermost identity, is our innermost identity, the theme of this week. And then there isn't actually so much to say about the I. We could say it's a fixed point and it's in the middle of the universe, and there are some other things. Martinus also says it's total stillness and it's in a way eternity. And he calls it sometimes the divine I, or something that is. But then he also writes quite a lot about this I. And it seems to me that it's quite important somehow to get in touch with this I. It's fixed, and how can we say this? Because everything else we experience is also always related to something, but the I is really something that is fixed, he says. It's always there, and we cannot run away from it, because what is then running away from what, we can also ask. So it's really something that cannot be destroyed. It's the eternal stillness, and it cannot be sensed with our sense organs. We cannot see it, and we cannot hear it, and we cannot touch it, and still somehow we have this vague feeling that it is there. We cannot run away from it, because what is then running away from what? We can also ask. What is really something happening now? It's like a double. Okay? Can I go on? Yeah? Martinus also says that it's the most difficult and incomprehensible, even though its analysis is so simple. And he really writes a lot about it. And I will try to make this lecture almost like a meditation on this I. There is going to be quite a few text parts from what Martinus writes, but I will try to make it so that you can also, in a way, go inside, because I think really it's the I is not there outside, like God is not also all out there. It's all inside of us. So it's a way to go inside. And maybe then we can, I don't know what word to use, feel it, somehow know that it is there. And theoretically, maybe with our intelligence we can, but to really be in contact with the I think is something that we are all working on. And I think this is also what all the mystics through all the years have been searching and coming closer and closer to this experience, to be aware in the I. For Martinus, when he in 1924 had his cosmic birth, when he got his cosmic consciousness, the first things he tried to explain in words, it was not so easy, but in symbols. Here is a combination of words and symbols. And this is actually the first symbol he made. It's now number 100 in the symbol books. And the name is the causeless cause, or the first cause. And the symbol shows that something which constitutes a triune principle that exists behind all things. And the three corners could also be like a symbol of these three X that we have heard of this week already several times. X1 is the Father, Providence, or the universe. And X2, he writes down here, is the faculty to create, or the world of sparks existing in the universe. And X3 is the world of forms, or that which is created. And the symbol is really all the 3x, but he usually uses it in other symbols, this white triangle, in a bit different form, but still in many other symbols as a symbol of the eye. And we can see it here in this symbol number 6, the living being, the eye, the divine something, he calls it also. It's outside of time and space. And then we have this from the eye, the triangle, this a bit mysterious transition into the, which he still calls the super consciousness, the second part, where this mother energy somehow mysteriously from this that doesn't change and move and is still, but something can emanate from this eye. And then it divides into the 6 spiral centers, and then we come down to the created world, where we have all the, well, the orange ring symbolizes our physical body, our physical organ, and then we have all the spiritual bodies or organs that actually make this body alive. But the beginning of this coming out from the stillness into movement is this, and also Martinus very rarely does this like a fog in a way, like a little cloudy transition into the world of energies and electricity, and then into the world of material substance. He calls this the mother energy, and he often uses the word father for the God, the father and the mother, and together they create, with the ability to create and experience, we create the whole created world that we live in. There's a very similar symbol, which this is number 90. It's also the living being, but now it's the night consciousness. This part beneath here, X3, he calls the subconsciousness, and it's divided into the day consciousness, which is the consciousness where we experience our physical experience in this physical world. But the night consciousness is where we are at night, and then our consciousness is connected to our spiritual body, the body of feeling, which is a body that is slowly developing in us. And this body is the one where we experience things in the spiritual world without knowing it, because when we sleep, we are going over to this other world. But this also happens when we go through what we call death, when we go over to the other side. Then we also experience the spiritual world with the help of our body of feeling. And all our bodies are actually our tools to experience life in this physical world, but also in the spiritual world. And I think that maybe when we get into this state of being where we are very calm and still, like in a meditation or maybe in silent prayer, I think maybe we get more and more in contact with this body. When the energy of gravity and the energy of feeling somehow get in balance, and we get somehow in this way maybe also a little connection to the energy of intuition. So then I would take the first quote from Martinus. That which is alive or living in the living being is unshakably the I and its eternal or cosmic structure of life. That is a structure that is not created. The dead aspects of the living being are its physical body and the other structures that constitute only created realities. And this is the text to this symbol number 6, and the first time you read it, wow, it's the only thing that is really living. is something that we don't even know. And the dead is what we think is our alive body. And this is really a very special way how he describes it, because our physical body and also our created spiritual bodies could not be alive if there wasn't an I with this cosmic structure around it. And the same is actually true the other way around. Only the I, without the other things, the ability to create and experience, and the created bodies and our created consciousness, that wouldn't even either be alive, actually. I think this comes in a later quote from Martinus also. Yeah, this physical body that we have, and also our consciousness, gets its power of movement and function from this eternal structure and from our I. This symbol you also recognize probably. This is how he splits up the main symbol that he has. It's over there also, that we also see a lot. Here the X1, it's not a triangle anymore, but it's a white circle. And then the X2 is the way how the one can be divided into the many. And then we have the created word over there. So now they are separated, but actually they are always together. This is the analysis of the triune principle. And he writes to this symbol, when this nameless, indivisible something constitutes the I behind the infinite universe and the I's in the living beings, it does so by virtue of an eternal, unshakable principle that causes something to appear to be split in such a way that it is still exists as a unit. None of these splits are liberated from this unit, but continue to be at one with it. And this is a bit paradoxical, to be one, but still we are somehow split from this unit in the middle. So this is also something that we can meditate over, how we can still be one, but still also individual. And it is actually because we also have this analysis of our eternal way of experiencing life is really because we also have this I and this super consciousness and the subconsciousness. Thank you. He also goes on here. Since this something or X1 constitute absolutely complete immovability or stillness, it here becomes evident that it is a corresponding sole absolute fixed point in the universe. And when we think of a fixed point, we think it's like with a nail put into something, but here it's really very different. It's fixed, but it's everywhere, or maybe nowhere. We don't really know, actually. And when we put all these three analysis together, we have the symbol number 11, the eternal word picture, or the living being too. And this could symbolize in the middle the Godhead that is split by this mother energy and the other energy spiral centers into all of us, into the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom and into the spiritual worlds. But we could also see it as one of us, because we also have this I in the middle, and we have all these microcosmic entities inside of us, living beings, who also have an I, and they also. So this is really a symbol that can be used for every living being. Sometimes when I look at this symbol, it is actually not moving, but sometimes it can feel, because the rays that go out from the star in the middle, and here it's not a triangle, and it's not a round thing because that's actually around the whole thing, but in the middle it's a star here. And sometimes it feels like it's pulsating, like impulses. Also the first symbol has also this. It's somehow the cosmic breath is all the time something going out, and it goes out, and it goes out. And from us also it comes energy waves, and where they meet, that's where the whole created world, the spiritual and also the physical world, is created, which we experience as our home in a way. Then he writes here also in this connection, since something is absolute stillness, then it cannot in itself be alive. That which makes this something alive is its unshakable connection with the two principles X2 and X3. So they are all, the three of them are really dependent on each other. And they are actually not three different things, they are three different aspects, three ways of looking into the I and looking out into the creation, the body that we have created in the physical material also. And here's another one. Where the ray of the Son of God meets the rays of the Godhead, reaction takes place. This reaction is the Son of God's experience of life. But it's actually also the Godhead's experience of itself. It needs us, all of us, to experience life also. Ripples in material or matter are created by the invisible eye. That's also a nice way of seeing it. Ripples in matter, movement, that it is created by this, that is stillness and eternal. So the eye, or this invisible something behind every organism, underlying all forms or objects, is thus the deepest cause of everything that can be sensed, experienced, or manifested. So it really, everything comes out of this eye. This is from Livets book, volume 2. And here also, therefore, terrestrial man is a being whose eye consciousness is at its first weak beginnings. Its knowledge about itself reaches only to its physical organism. So actually, he says that we are at our first weak beginning to have this sense that we also are this I. We don't have this I, but we are this I. What we have is our body, which many of us maybe not anymore. When we study Martinus, we somehow have this feeling, well, this is something that I use to live in this physical world. And also my consciousness is something that I use to have thoughts and feelings. But the thing that uses this is there's something that we are trying to, but we cannot really touch it with our hands. And with our consciousness, we can try at least. That immortal something or I in the organism, which constitutes the being's true self, he has not yet personally experienced. And I think this happens probably when we get the cosmic consciousness, when we get this cosmic birth, that we somehow really personally can experience. We can be conscious in the I and in the super-consciousness. This is also what he says in some quotes here. We have this vague feeling now. It's really the first stage of getting more and more in touch with it. Even though we use the word I all the time, but he says it's we are so used to it that we don't think about what it really means when we say, I do this, I say this, and so on. And maybe in this symbol we can see not all this, but only this at the side here. This is the animal and human thought climates, and he shows us here the development from the orange, from the animal kingdom. Slowly the real human kingdom is incarnating in us, and then we get to the cosmic consciousness up there at the thicker line there. But then this is symbolizing, this is the eye again here, this white that grows. And I think maybe he makes it like this, that we become more and more aware of this eye. And then these different colors here, the shifting symbolizes the reincarnation, that we all the time, even if we change our physical bodies many times, the eye is still the same, and it somehow, it can't grow because it doesn't have space and time, but our consciousness about it maybe can become more and more clear to us. And this, the reincarnation is also one of the important parts in Martinus cosmology, and he often talks about what the thing that makes humankind not develop spiritually is because we are so afraid of death. And I found this quote here in Livets Bok 2 also, that this change, as when we change from being physical to be spiritual, is apparently so drastic in the case of terrestrial man, so that the being actually sees or understands it as death and destruction, and experiences true terror at its approach, is only due to the fact that this being has not yet sufficiently developed the centers of organs through which he can make himself day conscious in his super consciousness, i.e. acquire cosmic consciousness. So when we slowly get more and more accustomed to the thought that we actually have eternal life experience, but that we change our bodies many times because our bodies they can't develop as fast as our consciousness. Our consciousness is still developing all the time, and our ability to feel this great love that is really the keynote of the universe, Martinus says, maybe that's also the energy that comes in rays, in impulses out from the Godhead. So that is what is going to happen, that we become more and more conscious in our super consciousness. The eternal body is the body that carries all the things that we have experienced and developed, and these things are all carried in this eternal body. And from this eternal body also we send out our impulses consciously or unconsciously, and it's also here that the consequences come back. And this is a symbol of the eternal body. So we can see here also the eye symbolized with the triangle in the middle, and the highest fire, maybe this should symbolize in the middle of the super consciousness. And then the eternal, all these circles of fate. What does he call them? Now the word disappeared. But this is the energies that we send out, small circles and bigger circles and even bigger. And they actually stretch not in space and time the way we think it, but they can move thousands of years and faster than the light, he says, but actually they don't move at all, because in the spiritual world, and especially in the super consciousness, there is no real movement. The only movement is when our talent kernels, they move into our eternal body, and when they are not needed anymore and we don't use them, then they also slowly fade away. So there is a small change in this eternal body. And also this body is always in balance, even if we are very unbalanced when we are here on earth, and maybe we are a bit more balanced in the spiritual world, but here this body is always in balance. And he writes, in actual fact, it is the Godhead which is the true sun of our inner being. By means of our body of eternity and superconsciousness, its radiance spreads into the darkness of the subconscious, so that day and night arise within us. And the interplay between light and dark, which we call life, thus comes to blaze, sparkle, and shine through us and from us, into our surroundings and into the lives of other beings. It's a beautiful way to describe it, how we also, he says that we are also all going to be like suns shining out, and also receiving all the sunshine from all the living beings around us. And it's really, the further we go into Martinus cosmology, the more we have this feeling that everything is somehow connected, all these little beings inside of us and all these big units outside there, everything is connected somehow. And through this sunshine, it's such a nice symbol in a way, the sun of the God. The golden halo or radiance he also sometimes describes, and that is also what he describes in his cosmic birth, that he comes so close to this Godhead, and closer than this golden threads we cannot come, then all our experience would be extincted. And here we have the symbol, which in a way also is like a sun shining in all directions. The universe is an ocean of light. In this ocean, every eye has its position. And as this ocean consists of various degrees of light, the position of each single eye will likewise manifest on a rising scale of light. That position will thus constitute a kind of center or middle point on the scale, from where the eye, on account of the principle of perspective, experiences the details of life. And here we also, with our eye, we are always in the middle of the universe. All of us are in one middle point, and we are all moving on this rising scale of light. I think in this symbol we can somehow think maybe that we are moving towards the light, all the way up, more and more closer to being actually at one with the Godhead, which we will actually experience already when we have the cosmic birth, but also when we are in the divine kingdom, where we really are at one with God. This symbol, number 1, is called the Spirit of God upon the face of the waters. And here, in reality, there is only the divine something existing in the universe. This eternal something sees itself in the form of all existing contrasts, which again, in their deepest analysis, only express conditions of perspective and are therefore illusory. And now we are coming closer to this really difficult analysis, because he says that we really live in a world of illusions. And this means that it doesn't mean that there is nothing that we experience, but what we experience is not what it really is, he says. And how will we know? Well, we cannot really know until we get this cosmic consciousness. He goes on here. Therefore, the sensing faculty can be seen as a something by which something number 1, or the eye, can experience itself. But an experience of this something is not the same as the something itself. In its deepest analysis, the experience can never in any case be other than a copy of the truth, of the true self. So however much we try to experience the I, it's impossible because we use the I to experience the I, and so what we experience is a copy, he says. It's not the real one, which we are. So it's like the I cannot see itself. Maybe that's a good way to. And he goes on, there will always be an insurmountable barrier between the absolute reality and the illusory or created reality. And when he writes this word barrier, many of us see this barrier and then we think, on the other side there, that's where the I is, and here am I. But I am here. Well, we can't go over there because in the order to be on the firm ground of normality, we must therefore recognize such an existing something as a master and the source of all things created. It is this reality which looks through our eyes, hears with our ears, speaks with our tongues, and thinks with our brain, and furthermore, whose existence we confirm with the one little word I, every single time we express anything about ourselves. And this, I think, also is a good way to try to what is seeing. It's not our eyes that see. We see through our eyes with the help of our eyes. And it's not the ears that hear. It's actually something we use to hear further inside. And also the brain and the tongue, all these are tools that we use to have this experience. And this little word I we use all the time. It's really a very short word in English also. And now we go to Livets Book 3. So what is a being's own deepest sense of this, its own highest self or I-like? Well, here there can be only one type of sense, namely a sense of center or midpoint. All of us, without exception, feel that the I is the most profound part in the midpoint of our own organism. Nothing more can be sensed in our own center than precisely the I. And I think we usually also, when we say I think this, we usually do something like this. We point somehow, even if we know it's actually not in a special place, but we have this feeling of a midpoint. And there is nothing else we can find inside there. So we have to, somehow the body and the consciousness and all this, and what is there, it's some kind of nothingness or an emptiness for us. But with our intuition, we can maybe have a little glimpse of what it is inside there in the midpoint. What is life? Here is a description also of what we do. Life is the drama which unfolds on the subconscious stage of the individual with the I as director and actor at the same time that I is sitting as spectator in the theater. But there is also another actor on this life stage of the individual, namely the God or Father. Without this actor, the play and thereby the experience of life would be an impossibility for the I. And this maybe we can sometimes witness in a way. We can see how we direct our lives more or less conscious. We can see how we act sometimes we have this feeling, oh, now I did this again, or now she did this again. I sometimes think it's like I'm looking outside at what I'm acting in life. And this, being the spectator, is somehow also this witness to that sees what we are doing in our life. But if we didn't have another actor to interact with, then we wouldn't have anything to experience. So actually we need all this around us. And sometimes Martinus says, it's only I and God. We are only two. And all of you are God to me, and here am I. And then God is actually also inside of me, I think. So this is a nice way to describe it. And this is also from Livets Book 3. The fixed point behind the movements cannot be expressed in words, other than the fact that it constitutes something that is. For there is nothing to express. That it nevertheless does exist is proved to be a fact through the registering or experiencing of the movements. It is through this registering or this experience that we sense ourselves each to be a center at the core of life itself, at the core of our surroundings and our own fate. So that we can experience things that move. Somehow there has to be the contrast to all this that changes all the time, that moves, that is, even if it sometimes looks like it's very still, but it's still changing somehow, all the created world, what he calls in the subconsciousness. But there must be a contrast to this, to be able, because a movement cannot experience a movement. So this, which is the innermost identity of us, is really necessary for us to have the life experience. Then we have this beautiful symbol, the eternal cosmic organic connection between God and the sons of God, where the living being's eye is in the middle and the Godhead's eye is up there, and the Godhead's eye is actually, the rays are going in all directions into the physical world and also into the spiritual world. And then he writes here, the rays in the violet part are the super-consciousness of God, which brings life to all spiritual and physical beings, as well as it is also the eye of God that brings life to all the sons of God, and thus God is alive in all beings. When this becomes alive within one, which it does with the growth of humanity, one gets a huge respect for all life, even for the smallest animal as well as the largest, even for the worst bandit as well as a saint. There will be nothing to criticize. And this, I think, is something that is happening within us slowly, more and more. We have this feeling that we are one with everything, and then we cannot actually criticize anything the way he says it here. That God's consciousness more and more comes through us and through every living being around us. And when this becomes alive in us, he says, that's when we really also become more and more alive, maybe we could say. This symbol we have also seen before this week, the human being's atomic world and the basic energies. And in connection to this symbol, Martinus writes that the I and the superconsciousness, our spirit, floats in the emptiness between the atoms in our organism. And that's also a nice feeling. We have to somehow expand our body and try to feel all these stars and suns and then all this empty space, which we know isn't empty because that's where our consciousness is. But there also our superconsciousness and our I floats there somehow. That's also a nice feeling maybe to work with. So now we have had quite a lot of things that Martinus says about this thing that is really not so much to say about, but he did have a lot to say about it. And I think many of us today also, we don't read only Martinus, we also find other books and maybe also people who talk on the YouTube and on the internet. There's so much we can find where so many people are looking for something else, not just this physical world and our daily business, which is nice, but there's also something more into life. And one of these writers who has inspired a lot of people is Eckhart Tolle. I don't know how you say it in English, but Eckhart Tolle, you probably heard of him. He had this sudden experience that he suddenly became aware that there is something in me that is I and still and all the other things that I thought I were. No, I'm not all this. I am really this. I am is also maybe a way to describe this feeling. And I think he has inspired a lot of people. And in contrary to Martinus, who writes a lot of thick books and a lot of text and so on, he usually has quite short things to say. And I think this is nice what he writes here. Life. It is your presence, the being. It is directly accessible for you as a feeling of your own presence. Observe the thinker. The now is the only place where you can come in contact with the timeless and formless being. And the first book he wrote is also called The Power of Now. And this, I think, a lot of people around the world are actually also talking much about this living in the now, because that's where we really are in the middle of eternity and infinity somehow. Eckhart Tolle doesn't use the word God so often either. He prefers the word being, the timeless and formless being. And here is one more. Suddenly, a boundless stillness emerges within you, an inscrutable feeling of peace. And in this peace, there is a great joy. And in this joy, there is love. And at the bottom of the deepest core, there is the holy, the immeasurable, that which has no name. And these texts are from a book he wrote later, Practicing the Power of Now. And he gives lectures around the world, and it's actually the only thing he cares about is that we get in contact with this I, this thing that has no name, this something that is this divine inside of us. Martinus opens the whole universe in another way, but I think even Martinus also means it's important for us to get in contact with this. And I will give the last word to Martinus here also, from the intellectualized Christianity. How could any being live without the Spirit of God, which constitutes the living governing I, or center in all living beings? He couldn't understand how we could live without praying and being in contact with God. And maybe we also sometimes feel we pray to get more contact also with God inside of us. So thank you for coming to this lecture.